Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to The Edit. My name is Matilda Marozzi. I'm a journalist at ABC Radio in Melbourne and I'm also on the board of the Press Club. Tonight, I'm joining you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to start the night by acknowledging their elders past, present and emerging. The Edit is the Melbourne Press Club's program for students, young and early career journalists, and it's supported by the copyright agency Cultural Fund. It's a space where you can learn new skills and ask all the curly questions you want, and also an opportunity for you to meet people working in the industry as well as your future colleagues. I'd also like to give a special mention to our new principal sponsor, the University of Melbourne. We look forward to working with them through 2021 and beyond. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your evening tonight to come to this webinar where we will try and answer the question, how do I get people to talk to me? It's a key part of being a journalist and something you'll need to do every day to get stories up no matter what medium you're working in. We're going to run for about an hour tonight and have a lot to cover with our guests. If at any time you have a question for the panel, please let me know. You can use the Q&A function and I will get to as many of them as I can throughout the evening. We're really lucky to be joined tonight by 3 award-winning journalists, and I'd like you to welcome them all. First up, we have Samaya Illambi. She's one of the state political reporters at The Age, and before that she worked at the Moorabool and Melton Star Weekly. Her work has been recognised by both the Walkley Awards and the Quills. Thanks for joining us, Samaya. We also have Heidi Murphy. She's a presenter at 3AW, as well as executive producer of the Neil Mitchell program and Melbourne Press Club Vice President. She's got a lot of experience, and if you can't get enough of her after tonight's session, you can tune into her on Sunday mornings on 3AW. And last but not least, Cassie Zervos. She's a reporter at 7 News Melbourne and formerly a journalist at the Herald Sun. She was also a cadet journalist at News Corp and has a lot of experience. In 2017, she was named Melbourne Press Club Young Journalist of the Year at the Quills. I might start with the basic question. It's a relatively common situation where you'll have a work experience student at your newsroom and you'll ask them to find an interview for a story and they'll want to know, what should I say? How can I convince someone to talk to me for this story? Cassie, I might start with you. If you have that situation, someone comes up to you, I need to get this interview for a story. How do I get people to talk to me? What's your advice?
Good evening, everyone. Firstly, my advice would be to be as genuine and as approachable as possible. I think the most important thing is making people feel comfortable and explaining to them what you're trying to achieve, and talk them through it if they're feeling a little bit nervous or unsure, and ask them, do you have any concerns? And if so, let's talk it through. For me personally, we have to convince people to talk on television. So the camera can be daunting. So I think the best thing to do is talk them through it and show them that you're a genuine person. And you can even say, look, I can understand why you might feel a little bit nervous about this, but here's why it would be a good reason to do it. And depending on what story it is or what topic it is, you sort of go through it that way and make that person feel like they can trust you, like you're sort of not necessarily a friend, but just a relatable person, I think.
Samaya, what do you tell people who might ask you that question in your newsroom?
Hi everyone. I would wholeheartedly agree with Cassie's points. I think it's about, and I don't think I realised journalism was more about people management than about writing or how good or how well you can speak or how great your English is. I think it's talking to people about your story, what you're trying to achieve, and tell them this is the context, this is the angle of my story, and this is what I would do. This is the angle of my story. This will be the lead, potentially the lead. This is how I'll be using your quote. If you have any concerns, I can send you those context paths to you. I can send you your comments back to you. At the end of the day, we're all human. I would appreciate if a journalist, if I had never dealt with the media and I had never dealt with journalists, for a journalist to do that to me. Or just understanding and appreciating the fact that not everybody deals with the media every single day. And I guess one of the best advice that I got was, in journalism, unfortunately, you do have to be pushy. If someone says to you, no, I'm not interested, I want this to be off the record, your first, instinct is probably like, okay, I'm going to leave you alone. But it should be the total opposite. Hey, no, let's talk through this with you. Why do you want to stay off the record? And if you do go on the record, your comments and your story is probably going to have a bigger impact than it otherwise would have.
Remember, at any time, if you've got a question, I'd prefer to be asking your questions than my own, so please put them in the Q&A. Use the Q&A function to put them through, and I'll put them to the panel. Heidi, what do you say? Because often in a situation in live radio, you're trying to get people up quickly, and it's often early in the morning that you're calling people and waking them up. So if you've woken someone up, what do you say to them? What do you tell the people who are new to the show?
Well, this is something you'd be very familiar with yourself, Matilda. Hi, everybody. You just have to ring them first thing, and you just have to, sorry for waking you. Didn't realise it was so early. I'm trying to think what other tricks we try along those lines. Oh, I forget, not everybody works the hours we work. We'd really love to get your perspective on whatever the story is, or you're the person who is the only one who can take us to the heart of this, or you're the only person who could describe this to us. Here's why it's really important that you, come on the radio right now with Neil, or come on the radio in an hour's time with the host. One of the things I like to encourage people to say when they're making these phone calls is very much what Cassie and Samaya was saying, that they're people, your people. You've got to be relatable, you've got to be approachable. And sometimes as soon as you say, oh, it's Heidi from 3AW, people go, well, I don't want to talk. But you get through that. You just, I just wanted to ask you about this, and can you just give me some perspective on that, or help me understand this a little bit better? Is there anything you're able to tell us about, this particular circumstance? Like, a truck went through the front of your house this morning. I know you don't want to go to air, but could you describe it for us, what it sounded like, what it felt like? And then as you talk to people for long enough, you can often get to the point where you'll say, oh, you've told it really well. Talking on the phone to Neil is, unlike, say, Cassie's situation where you've got to rock up with a camera and point it in their face, it's just talking on the phone to him like this. It's just exactly the same. So it's often, once you get past the awkwardness of those very early phone calls that you sometimes have to make, people are often happy to chat on the phone if they feel like they've got control. They've got something to say, an ability to say it, a platform to say it on. Those are normally the sort of directions I'd go with things.
If you've just joined us, you're watching The Edit. We're a Melbourne Press Club event for young and early career journalists, and today we're trying to answer the question, how do I get people to talk to me? And one of the attendees, feel free to include your name so I can credit you, has asked a question. They're curious to know how you raise conversations with sources where you know that going public will in some way be a negative experience for them, where there might be some backlash. Heidi, I might go to you, because I know with talkback radio, that backlash can be instant and quite brutal.
Yeah.
So what do you say to people if you know that potentially if they go on air, what they say isn't going to be popular with all the people listening?
Well, I'd say to them first, you realise this won't be popular, and sometimes people will be incredibly concerned about that. And I'm not going to force somebody to be the target of some horrible online campaign. You absolutely know the backlash that's coming. So I never force people into that situation or try to talk them into it, because like we've just said, we're human too. I wouldn't want to force that on anybody. But sometimes people are up for the fight. They absolutely want to say what they want to say. And the way to get around it is to say, by coming live on the radio, you can get everything off your chest. You can say all that you want to say. We're not going to just get a grab of it. We're not just going to cut it into pieces. You can tell your whole story. You can explain your perspective on something and go from there. Sometimes, even when you've taken all of the precautions you can around trying to protect people from themselves, say, even when you've done all of that, sometimes the oddest things will go completely viral and there'll be backlash about, and you do not see that coming at all. So it's difficult to predict that all the time, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Samaya, I was wondering, we're talking about how to get people to talk to you, but before you try and convince someone, you have to get in touch with them. What are some of the ways that you find people's contact details so that you can approach them for comment in the first place?
Go to places. I'm a state political reporter. My advice to myself and anybody who would listen is go to Parliament. If you're covering Parliament, if you're covering a local council, go to their council meetings. There are constantly, AGMs, for example, for businesses, or there's the Victorian Chamber of Commerce and Industry does events, the Property Council does events. There are all of these events that people in the industry groups generally put on. And I guess it's sort of about going in the face and people being familiar with you, I go to Parliament, I bump into someone in the corridor. I'm like, hey, hi, how are you? How's it going? Oh, by the way, we're about to depart. And I'll say, oh, can I just grab your phone number just in case I ever need it? And it's about saving every single person's phone number. And it's only a habit that I sort of got into in the past couple of years. But if I get a phone number for someone, or if I've spoken to someone on the phone, I try to make a habit to always save their number, because one, you never know when you're going to need it. And two, you're probably going to need it and just regret the fact that you haven't saved their phone numbers. Long answer short, just attend places, attend things and events. And I think with covering Parliament, politicians want to see you there. Politicians want to know that you have an interest in Parliament and that you have an interest in what they're doing, and that you're not there just for the big stories or the big yarns. You're willing to put in the hard work, and you're willing to take time out of, whether it's your work day or the morning, the evenings, and that pays off plentifully.
Cassie, you've worked at both the Herald Sun newspaper and now you're working in TV. Is how you find contacts, has that changed at all between those two roles?
Well, when I was at the Herald Sun, I mostly focused on crime, and at Channel 7, I still do heavily focus on police rounds and crime. So I was lucky to take the contacts that I had at the paper with me. But sort of like what Samaya said, it's so important, particularly with police officers. If there's a press conference, if there's a stand-up, you show your face and you go over to them and say, hey, I'm Cassie, I'm from Channel 7. And often police officers are quite nervous to do stand-ups too. And they sort of and ah, and they don't want to do it. So what I have found is sort of talk to them beforehand and say, this is what I'm going to ask you. I'm not going to ask you any hairy questions. Just look at me, try and ignore the cameras, and that way it's more conversational, and you also get the best out of them and the best for us grabs, so to speak. So the transition with contacts for me, I was very lucky. I'm lucky enough to sort of keep doing crime. But it's just meeting people face to face, and say there's a story that particular police officer, was there all day for. What I would do is, once it goes on Twitter or Facebook, I'd get the link and I'd actually email it to police media and say, hey, thanks so much for organising today's stand-up. Just in case the investigator wants to check out our story, or if the family do, here's the link. And that sort of creates a good relationship also with police media. So for those who don't know, police media is our sort of like point of call. If there's a horrible crash, or if there's a horrible crime, we call them first and we ask, hey, is there any vision? Is it likely police will be doing a stand-up? And they're sort of our liaison, so to speak. So it's just about relationship maintaining and building, and trying to not necessarily keep people happy, but being as sort of honest and open as possible, as much as you can, of course, as well.
Yeah. And I wonder, Cassie, covering crime, often you're turning up at a crime scene and you might be trying to find witnesses or potentially family and friends. Do you still get nervous when you turn up to those situations and you need to try and get someone to speak to you when something quite difficult has just happened to them.
Yeah, I find fatal car crashes really hard because often family and friends go. They want to go and they want to see where the their loved one took their last breath. And obviously with cameras, it's really difficult too, because we have to capture that emotion and what's going on, but we have to do it in a way that's really respectful. So what I normally do is, with the cameraman, I'd speak to them on the way there and say, look, this is the plan. Let's see what happens once we arrive. If there's family there, let's try and not get the cameras out straight away. Let me approach them, or let's just watch what happens. And then that way we get an idea as well. Because sometimes people see us and we're the target, they're grieving, and we're the easiest ones to take that out on. And that's the last thing anyone wants. So my cat's just jumped up. So what I would do is leave the cameraman in the car or nearby, just in case I need to call them over. And I'd leave the microphone with him and go, look, hi, I'm Cassie. I'm from 7. I'm the last person you want to see right now. I know that. And I'm so sorry that I'm here. But we would love to do a tribute for your loved one, and sort of talk to them like that and see. They might say straight away, nah, not interested, go away. And you go away and you respect that. And you just wait. Because they might change their mind, they might not. But the best way is I always leave the cameras and the microphone in the car and just go over as a human being and say, I know this is not what you want. You don't want media here. You don't want cameras. You don't want us. But unfortunately, I'm here and I want to do the best job I can do. So if there's anything you'd like to say, some beautiful words, maybe a picture, I'll be here. And sometimes they come over, sometimes they don't. It just depends on the situation, I think.
I've got a question here from Faith, who's asking if you've ever had to deal with interviewees who English is not their first language, and if so, how would you adjust the situation and make the interviewee feel comfortable?
I feel like compared to Heidi and Cassie's experiences, print journalism is the easiest medium. And because I'm sort of like transcribing the audio, so I don't necessarily need to, the person that I'm interviewing doesn't necessarily need to have the most perfect English. How I would sort of approach anyone, just, whether it's speaking slower, I might speak slowly, I might have to repeat the questions. The interview might take, 30 minutes instead of 10 minutes, or they might have a translator who can sort of help translate things, translate what that person's saying for me. But I guess they're not really a barrier to my story. It's okay if it takes someone 30 minutes to explain their story and not 10 minutes. Like, I don't have all the time in the world, but I'm not as time constrained as what, as what a live radio program might be.
Cassie, we've got a question here for you from Brooke. She's asking, if you're reaching out to a victim's family through social media, how would you go about that? What would you say? Is that something that you've had to do in the past?
I do it, Brooke. I do it every single day on my Facebook account and often Instagram account. I make sure my social media accounts are very, safe, I think the word is, because I am reaching out to them on my Facebook and my Insta. And I normally just say, hi, Brooke, for example, my name is Cassie. I'm a reporter from Channel 7. I'm really sorry to be reaching out to you via Facebook, but it's the only way I can sort of track you down at the moment. I'd love to have a chat to you about this particular incident. Here's my mobile number. So I always give mine to make it look like they can trust me. I'm legit. And I'd also sort of say what I'm sort of, reporting that day. I'm covering a fatal, and we'd love to do a tribute for your friend. And I'd love to give you the opportunity to say something that you might like, a particular memory. I like to use the word, I'd like to give you the opportunity. That's why I'm reaching out. Because I think it sort of makes it sound like, oh, that's sort of nice that they want to include me, perhaps. Maybe not necessarily for parents of a victim, but sort of that broader range of friends. That's how I normally do it. And my Facebook inbox, I kid you not, is victims. It's just victims. And if they don't want to talk straight away, I say, totally understand. I respect that. Maybe I'll check in a few days. And I do. And I go, hey, how are you holding up? and they might say, I'm really struggling. That's okay. No worries. Just wanted to check in. Not necessarily always asking to, hey, I really want to do an interview with you tonight. It's got to be at 3:00 this afternoon because it's got to go to air at 6, because that puts people under pressure and it just makes them think I'm just wanting to get something out of it myself. Often I might check in, the next day and say, hey, I'm really keen to do that story. I haven't forgotten about you. How are you going? How are you holding up? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it just makes that person feel like, okay, that day's news cycle is over, but they're still thinking about me. That's nice.
Thanks so much, everyone, for putting your questions in the Q&A. Heidi, I might throw this one to you that we've got from Drishti. Cassie was just talking about, Instagram and Facebook, but I was wondering what other online sources you might use to try and track down people you want to get on the radio.
Yeah, I was thinking as Cassie was talking, we do a lot of the same thing. You try, it's a wonderful search tool. I was actually just thinking when I first got into journalism, I started working in 1999. We had this system called Australia on Disc, where you could just search anybody in the country's phone number or street address. I don't think that exists anymore. No one has landlines anymore. It was strange. But the social media channels, you can always send a tweet out into the world saying we're seeking somebody on this, or there's been an earthquake in New Zealand. Let's just find anybody who's posted anything and just DM them, reach out to them, message them direct, whatever you can. We use that a lot. We use Instagram and Facebook, because we're a generation that is so online. People will put incredible stories and be so open to having messages that appear. Similar to what Cassie says, you would never say, "Oi, send me your number, I need to do a story on this." You'd be much more respectful. Send your phone number so you seem legitimate. And then you'd also just search online for if it's somebody who's maybe or you think has had a job where their mobile number might be on the internet. You can always just plug their name into Google and just keep trying if it's someone in particular that you're looking for.
You cannot underestimate a Google search. You
Unbelievable.
never know what documents might be out there with someone's phone number on them somewhere, and people don't change their numbers as often as you might think. So it's worth a shot. And
I probably should use some other search engines. I've only said Google as the example there, but that's the one I use most often.
I've got another interesting question from Alan, actually. With so much of journalism being about reaching out to people and developing relationships, do you think people with introverted personalities can make good journalists? I think I was similar to Samaya when I got into journalism. I didn't quite realize how much of it would be people management and how little of it would be writing. But so I might go to you, Samaya. Do you think people who are introverts can make good journalists, or you have to be extroverted?
I don't think you have to be extroverted. I wouldn't necessarily consider myself an overly extroverted person. I'm pretty, I'm pretty introverted and private in my personal life. But I think, and journalism has, and I can't explain this, so maybe this is just a crap answer, but journalism has brought out a level, whoops, sorry, the lights have gone off. Whoops. Journalism has brought out a level, it's made me find this self-confidence in me that I never knew existed. So maybe it's something that does come to a lot of people over time.
That's an interesting answer, because I think personally I found in my personal life I would never go up to someone and just start a conversation. But for some reason, Matilda Morozzi, ABC journalist, I feel like I have permission to, and I would consider myself introverted. But when I'm calling not as myself a person, I'm calling as Matilda, a journalist from a news organization, I feel much braver about approaching people, and I feel like I have permission to talk to anybody, which is an incredible thing about journalism. No one is really too surprised when you get in touch with them, because it's kind of part of your job, I guess. I don't know, Cassie, is that something you can relate to?
Yeah, which is weird because I door knock people every single day and I walk up and I don't think twice and I just do it. But then if I have to make dinner reservations, I'm like, oh, I don't really want to call up, which is so weird, which is bizarre. I just thought of that now. It's so weird. And I think that's correct. Like, I'm in work mode. This is who I am. This is who I work for. But yeah, it's I wouldn't consider myself an over extroverted person either, which is weird because obviously I work now on telly, but I love the journalism side of it. I love getting people to talk and meeting people. The TV side of it, I still get quite very nervous with, to be honest. But I guess that means you care, right? I think that's all part of it too.
I reckon one of the good things about introverts is they're probably good at listening. They probably aren't wanting to be the life of the party or the one everybody's looking at and paying attention to. They're good at listening, I think.
And Heidi, listening's probably a more important part of the job than speaking, really.
Yeah, it can be. Obviously, you want to ask that ball-breaking question. You want to ask that one that catches them out, sure. But often it's the listening where you find things out. You reflect more on it. You absorb it more, and often you'll find an angle you hadn't thought of, or you'll find when you're listening closely or you're listening properly, the conversation or the interview can move in directions you're not expecting. Whereas if you're sitting there just with your list of questions where you're like tick, 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 if you're listening to them and having a conversation or engaging with them, going where their answers take you to the next question, it's a much better interview. You'll get a much better story.
Well, I think you also find a lot of stories through listening. You might approach someone for one story, but in the process of talking to them, trying to convince them to speak to you about whatever it is that's happening that day, they might just happen to mention off the cuff that they're part of this incredible thing, or they were actually the first person to have long COVID in the state, or there could be so many things that you get from listening. So I definitely wouldn't underestimate the power of being an introvert in this job, and potentially maybe the job might help give you some of that confidence, as Samaya said. Samaya, you talked a bit before about learning how to save people's contact details, and that's an important thing, trying to keep track of your contacts. Do you have a system for that, Samaya, or you just keep them in your phone as you go along?
I'd love to get Heidi and Cassie's tips on this. When I first started, I had a green contact book. Where is it? You're here.
Bless you.
Not very loved though, because I was finding myself, like saving Matilda Marozzi. Should I save her under M? Should I save her under A? ABC producer. So that was all getting very confusing. I just find my phone's contact book the easiest and the simplest. I can access it wherever I am. I can access it in the middle of the night if I need to. And it's just, I can save it under ABC and Matilda and they'll both come up.
Yeah. Cassie, what about you? How do you try to organise and manage your contacts?
I tried to do the book. I tried when I was a cadet, and that's what they tried to teach us, but I just went back to my phone. It's just easier. My phone's always on me. I can chuck it in my handbag. I don't carry even a diary. I don't carry it on me 24/7. So I did really try, and I really wanted to, impress my cadet boss at the time and use the book, but I didn't. I failed that miserably. So my phone, and I back it up always, always, always. And if there's like a really important number, I might screenshot it and save it in my favorites. But yeah, I use my phone.
Heidi, what about yourself?
Yeah, definitely phone. And you can put, to Samaya's point of what you file people under, you can put as much in the notes or the descriptors as you like, and you'll be able to find things when you're searching for it. I sometimes try to use my calendar on the computer if I know there's something coming up, and I'll attach a person's name and number in there. On, say, our program at Neil's program, we print out our rundown every day and put important numbers in the book. So if we're ever searching for, hey, what was that great story with that woman who did that thing a couple of years ago, we can search, find it, her number's in the book, then you ring her up from there, because those aren't necessarily numbers I'd always keep, but it's a contact of the program. And I was just thinking, Cassie, you would have seen Nick McCallum's book that he walks around with. So Nick McCallum, who I work with on Sunday mornings, who works with Cassie at 7, has the A4 size diary, similar to what you held up, Samaya, the diary, and he starts the year out and it's this perfect, like, Collins A4 book. By the end of the year, it's like this big and it's held together with this big elastic band. It's got newspapers and bits and pieces stuffed in there. I think he still uses it as like a proper, like, contact book of everything. I think there's a pile at the 7 newsroom, isn't there, in his corner?
Oh, there is.
So, I mean, but you don't actually want to lose the number you've got. So like Cassie said, always back it up if it is on your phone.
Yeah. When I first started as a producer at ABC Radio in Ballarat, one of the first things that I was told by one of my mentors was keep every phone number of every person you ever speak to, because you never know when you might need it one day. And I took that seriously, and I quite like spreadsheets. I'm unusual in that respect, I guess. No. But I have a spreadsheet that I keep, secured, that has the number of, pretty much every person I've ever contacted, and with as many keywords as possible and alternate spellings that I might, when I'm looking up, if I spell it wrong, hopefully that'll catch it. And I use it every single day. You'll go be doing a story. Today I was doing a story about drinks being spiked. And so, I might look up drink spiking or drugs or, Alfred Hospital, and then can just go find next and go through all the contacts in that spreadsheet. And so I found that is a good way for me to organize it, because I can access it, remotely on my phone if I'm out, or on my computer if I'm at my desk. So it also means I don't have thousands of contacts in my phone that I might accidentally text or call if I'm trying to get in touch with a friend, which hasn't happened yet, but there's plenty of time left for that.
And I say for some of my breakfast radio contact colleagues like to have a full contact book of people they can ring, a similar spreadsheet like that, people who they know will take their calls pre 5 a.m, pre 6 a.m. Don't underestimate that, with a little asterisk next to it in your contact spreadsheet.
It is good to know, like, who you can rely upon to get back to you if you do need an answer quickly, particularly in the early mornings. There was a couple of people who you hear on breakfast radio all the time, and I guarantee you it's because they answer their phone when they're called.
They're good talent. They answer their phone. They'll answer questions.
Got an interesting question that I might put to you, Samaya, because I know that you've worked on some pretty big investigations as part of Teens of the Age, and they're asking, when you're collaborating on investigative work, does it become tricky when you have to share your contacts with other journos? Are journos working together usually protective of their own contact book? So what's been your experience of that, Samaya?
I think it sort of depends. There are contacts of mine that I would never share with anyone, because I wouldn't want anyone to know that I'm actually talking to them or that they're talking to a journalist. So there are people who are just on principle I won't share. But then there are also others who I would. And I think the great thing about, teamwork and collaborations, particularly for print journalism, I'm not sure if it's the same for like radio and TV, you always get a much stronger story when you're doing teamwork, because, like Nick, for example, he might have all of these contacts that he can rely upon, and then I can obviously dive into my contacts book and then speak to my own contact, and then suddenly, instead of only being able to speak with 10 or 15 people, your talent pool is now whatever it is, 30, 40 people, and you're getting a better range or a better idea of what's actually going on. I will frequently ask my colleagues, hey, do you have a phone number for this person? Or, hey, do you have a phone number for that person? As I said, if it's a contact who I know I shouldn't be sharing their details with, I won't. Some people I do. I'm protective of my sources in the sense where I want to just protect them, and I want to make sure that they feel like they can trust me, or that they can trust me, and I'm not going to break their confidence.
Cassie, what's your experience with sharing contacts? Because I've had a very limited amount of time on the road doing TV journalism, and I was quite surprised, even between different outlets, it felt like quite a collegial environment out there when you're turning up to the same stories. Would you ever share contacts with other journalists, either at your station or even from other stations?
No, I wouldn't. I sort of like Samaya, I would help where I can, or I'd make a call on their behalf, perhaps. But at the end of the day, no. I think the reason why, if they're telling you information and they trust you, I think that is the most important thing over anything, and you've got to nurture that and respect that so much. But say my colleague in my newsroom is working on a story, and I know that someone who's, you know, looking at police officer who's there, or something like that, I could say, hey, I'll make a call for you, and then pass on information if I can get it. But I would never hand over a number or a name. No, I would never do that.
And what about you, Heidi? What's your experience of sharing contacts?
Well, so between programs, we'll sometimes share contacts or around the network. For example, when Michael Gudinski died the other day, we had several stations in the network get in touch asking for a number of someone who'd been a contributor to Neil's program. We didn't share it on that occasion because that person had asked us to never pass their number out. But on other occasions, certainly we would share things around when it's a particular interview, or it's a particular set of contacts. Like the Brecky team gave us a phone number for someone the other day, an interview they'd run out of time to do, so they just shared it. You want the best result, and you want the interviews on the station. Something people may not realise we do too is if we've got some cracking eyewitness to a terrible car crash or a police pursuit or something, and they tell this gripping story on the radio, the TV news desks ring and ask for the contact number for that person. And usually if we're sharing it with one, we'll share it with all, but we always get the person's permission before we do that. We don't just hand them out willy-nilly. But there's a bit of sharing that goes on, but very similar to what Samaya and Cassie said. If you've a contact of your own, someone you've dealt with, someone that trusts you, you never give that away.
And Samaya, there you talked about, you know, how there's some sources you wouldn't give their information away because you wouldn't want people to know they were speaking to you. How do you find these people who are useful? They give you information that you can use, but for whatever reason, you decide not to disclose who they are, or you agree to keep their identity a secret. What kind of things lead to you developing relationships like that?
There's a bit of luck. And I hate saying that because I ask this question to other people all the time as well. How do you find that one solid person who's going to give you all the information that you need? There's a bit of luck. I have some really good contacts, and the only way I found them was through luck. Some of them just found me. And I think it's always about the relationship that you build with that person. And it should never be about, I never see my sources as, you know, oh, there's this big breaking news story, or I want this scoop, I'm just going to give this person a call. Like I'll message them late at night. I'll give them a phone call on the weekend just to say, hey, how are you going? What's up? I'll send them, you know, funny memes or tweets or whatever it is. And I don't want to use the word friendship, but I do strike a really close personal relationship with some of my sources and my contacts because, like, I care about them. Of course I care about them, you know. I care about what they have to say, and I genuinely do. I care about our conversations, and I really value that time with that person. And I think through that and through you being able to be so open and and not treating it as just like a journalism source, journalism contact relationship, but you're able to get to a point in that relationship where they're sharing information with you that's useful, or they're sharing information with you that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to.
And what's the value of having off the record sources? Generally, off the record, you can't use the information, or maybe they'll give you information on background where you can use the information but not attribute it. Why is that valuable for you, Samaya?
Because it gives me that level of, like, life isn't black and white. There are millions and billions of shades of grey. Not everything is as it seems. And there is so much nuance to a lot of things, and those off the record and background conversations provide that level of nuance and those shades of grey that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to get with an on the record comment. I find those frustrating though, particularly when it comes from a government department. They're willing to put the statement out there. They send it via email, but they'll be like, you know, this is on background. You can't attribute it to anyone.
So annoying.
I guess I always try and use it because, like, as annoyed as I am at that particular government department or agency, like, my duty is to present a really honest, factual and truthful story. And I'm not going to be able to do that if I just say, actually, I'm never using off the record or background comments.
Cassie, I've got a question that I think you might have had to deal with this issue trying to get grabs for television. Samantha's asked, if the person you're interviewing is rambling and going a bit off topic, what strategies do you use to politely steer them back so you don't offend them?
Often I just sort of politely cut in. If they're rambling or if they feel if they're sort of umming and ahhing, when they sort of go, I'll go, so tell me again, what did you hear this morning? And they're like, oh yeah, so I heard this huge bang, and it sort of just triggers them again. So I wait for that moment where you can sort of see that they're not really sure where they're going with it. And then I go in, I'm like, oh, sorry about, butting in, but can you just tell me again what happened there, or what did you see, or what time did the police arrive? And then that, triggers their mind to hopefully go back on track.
Will you ever give them specific, will you ever explain how you're going to use the footage and say, if you can, make it a bit more succinct because I only give 10-second grabs and I can't use an extended statement. Will you ever kind of explain more of the logistics of how a TV package is cut together?
If they ask, I definitely do. If they're sort of like, so what do you want me to say? I'll just say, look, so normally what I try and do is have a conversation before we get the cameras out, sort of like a practice for them. And I'll say, this is what I'm going to ask you. And it warms them up. And then I'll say, all right, let's do it again, but on camera. And I'm like, ignore him or her and just look at me. And I ask again. And they might, go on and on and on again. And again, I'll try and say, what happened? What time did the police arrive? What time did the ambos come? But often I just let people sort of do their thing, say what they want to say. And we've got editors, so we'll just cut it. Because the last thing I want to do is sort of make them feel uncomfortable. If they want to go on a 10-minute tangent, let them, If they're agreeing to go on camera and giving me their time, I just let them say whatever they want to say. And we can always find something around it. And then look, if it's not usable, it's not usable, So
does that happen often?
Not really, to be honest. Sometimes, but not really. Like if I'm doing a sit-down, organised interview with the victim's family, I will always go through the questions beforehand and say, this is how I'm structuring the story. It's a beautiful tribute to your loved one who has tragically passed away. I'm going to be asking you, what are you going to miss the most? When did you find out what happened? How do you want the public or your family to remember them? So it sort of gets them thinking as well, which I think is helpful. But no, I normally just let people sort of do their thing because I think that's when people feel comfortable.
Yeah. Interestingly, whenever I've done kind of workshops on reporting on trauma or dealing with people who've had trauma, they talk a lot about giving that person some control. And I think all of you have spoken a bit about that this evening, about making sure you get informed consent. Cassie, you explaining what's going to happen and giving people control, a bit of control over the situation can help, people with trauma. But I guess any person, if you're trying to develop a relationship of trust, if they felt like they knew what was happening, that's going to help with that relationship, particularly for people who aren't media trained. But Gillian's got a question that I think I'll put to you, Heidi, about people who are very well media trained. Any suggestions for getting past the information gatekeepers, aka media advisors, to get information or quotes rather than carefully canvass generic statements? How do you try and manage some of those relationships, Heidi, with different media advisors?
Well, you just have to deal with the media advisors. They're in it for they know what they're doing. We know what we're doing. They've got a job to do. I've got a job to do. We'll sometimes have pretty frank exchanges, some media advisors and I, over the journey. Just got to deal with them. sometimes they'll try the sending things through on background, and we'll say, no, we're not going to use that. We need to hear directly from, if we're talking, say, a government or a local government or state government or federal government role, it's no, we need to speak to the person. We need to hear it from them. And sometimes it'll work. Sometimes they'll put people up, and sometimes they just won't, and you are left stuck with just a statement. But even then, getting the minister to come on air or getting the councillor to come on air isn't always a guarantee that they'll suddenly answer questions clearly anyway, because they are media trained to within an inch of their lives increasingly, and it is so frustrating. I don't have a good tactic around it other than getting them on air with Neil and then letting Neil do his thing. That's my best approach to that.
Samaya,
interrupt them a lot. That's the tactic, interrupt them a lot, and that usually gets them agitated to a point where they'll finally say something.
Is that once you've got the politician on air, or?
Yeah, or at a press conference or something, yes, interrupt as much as possible. Interrupt the spin, and they'll eventually, hopefully, lose their minds and answer it.
Well, often when you do, for live interviews, if you do get a politician on, one of the techniques they might employ is just you ask them one question, and if they spend the whole 10 minutes you have allocated answering that one question, then you can't get in with any more questions. So
we interrupt. It's
a difficult thing to learn how to do, because it feels rude, but if you don't interrupt, you're not going to get the answers your audience needs. So
well, and they're being rude just talking for 10 straight minutes. They started it.
Samaya, Joseph's wondering if, as state political reporter, do you still have to go through the media advisors when you're trying to get to politicians, or do you have a direct line to some people?
We obviously, you obviously have contacts, as you would, but if it's a story, it's generally just going through the media advisors. Like the politician they wouldn't comment to me on a story that publicly that hasn't gone through their media team. Like as Heidi said, they're just media managed within their lives, and it's frustrating. It's annoying. Sometimes you might call and just say, look, I just had this quick question just on background. Are you able to sort of give me a proper steer on what's actually going on? The thing is, even with politicians, never underestimate, particularly after a press conference, just hang around afterwards. And if they've stuck around as well, say, hey, how are you? What's going on? Just have a general chat to them as well. Have a chat to them about about whatever it is that they're announcing. And you might be able to glean some more information through that. You might not be able to use it on the record, but it'll help your understanding of what's being announced as well.
And they probably love it if you run after them to just say, oh, hey, could I just check the thing about the thing and the thing?
Yeah, and I guess there is so much news in the world, and there is so limited space in all of these different media platforms that I don't know if politicians feel equally as flattered, but I would if I were a politician. Like a journalist is expressing interest in your portfolio, in what you've just announced or in what you're about to announce, or in an policy area that you're working on. They want that media coverage. They want to be able to tell the world, hey, look how great I am, and look at all of the great things that I've been working on your behalf.
If you've joined in late and you're not sure what we're doing here, this is the Melbourne Press Club's edit program. We've only got a few minutes left, so if you've got a question for Samaya from The Age, Cassie from Channel 7, or Heidi from 3AW, get them into the Q&A, and I'll see if I can get to a few more of them before we finish up at 7:30. My name's Matilda Morozzi. I'm from the ABC, and I'm also on the Melbourne Press Club board. There's a question for you, Cassie, from Faith, wondering how do you try and convince an interviewee to go on camera if that's what they're reluctant about, showing their face on TV?
So what I try and do is make them feel comfortable. Often we are out there really early, first thing in the morning. So I normally start at 6 o'clock. And when I'm door knocking, people are having their breakfast, getting ready for work. And a lot of, girls are like, oh, I haven't got my makeup on. And I'm like, don't worry, it's shoulders up, you'll be fine. We're getting heaps of reaction today. It won't just be you. And if they look like I really don't want to do it, there's also the option of filming filming it in a way where we don't identify them. So we'd shoot them from the back, or often through a fly screen, which you guys might see quite a bit. And so we do subtitles at the bottom, or we blur. If we really need them, that's like the last resort. We'll blur them, or we'll shoot. We'll get the audio and just shoot their hands or their back. So there's always that option too. That's sort of like when I'm like at the bottom of like I've used all my tricks, there's nothing left. And then sometimes people just don't want to go on TV, and that's okay too. And I say, you know what, that's cool. Have a great day. Maybe I'll be around here for a while. Probably we'll be here at 6 p.m. tonight. So I'll see you after work. If you change your mind, I'll be here. And I have a joke with them and make them feel, like, because sometimes people feel bad too. And I'm like, it's cool. Like, you don't want to do it. I get it. And just move on.
Is there a high bar for giving people that anonymity?
It's hard for us. It's really hard for us. And like our work sort of like, if someone's really scared to show their face because there's been a bad home invasion and they're worried the offenders are going to come back, then I totally get that. But if it's just because they don't want to go on TV, I'm sort of like, it's easier to put, like I try and explain to them, when you're watching it tonight, it's better to see your face than like a blurred screen or your hands. And so then they're like, oh yeah, I sort of see where you're coming from. Okay. It's not live, is it? And of course it's never live. So it's just having a conversation with people and just being as like, hey, this is what I'm doing. You've probably seen this on the news before. And if they really don't want to do it, there's no point making people feel uncomfortable and pushing them. So I just leave it. I'm like, cool, move on to the next house.
They're probably not going to be great talent either if they're so nervous.
Well, and that's it. And that's the thing as well. You want people to put their faces to it. And most, to be honest, most do. You don't want to give people too much time to think about it too. So I'm always like, hey, super quick, call the camera over, get the mic. And unless they say, no, don't want to be on camera, then I'm like, all right, camera's down. But I'll when they're sort of thinking, oh, maybe, I'm like, cool, yeah, here's the mic. What'd you hear? Just get it done. And then they're like, oh, do I look okay? And I'm like, yeah, you look great. Let's get this done. And then you can go back and get ready for work. And I can move on to the next home.
Yeah. Samaya, another question here. I'm not sure if you've had to deal with this so much reporting for a newspaper, but have you ever had issues with people being aggressive to you when you're with them in person, and how have you dealt with that if you have been in that situation?
I'm lucky that I haven't, but I also haven't been like a crime or police reporter. I haven't been a breaking news reporter, and I'm confident that those rounds reporters probably deal with aggression a lot more than what I would. Like, a politician isn't going to be aggressive. They're not going to tell me to, F off or anything like that.
A media advisor might, but
No, I don't think I'm the best person to answer that question. I don't want to put Cassie on the spot, but maybe she has some.
Yeah, I'm sure it's happened to
Oh, I have been told where to go most days. I get so at those protests, I was spat on.
Oh.
I was called all the name. I won't go through it, but very colourful language. And even with families, like door knocking families, people have said to me stuff like, how do you sleep at night? And most of the time they're grieving, and I get that. So I say, look, I know if you don't want me here, I'll go. I'm just doing my job. I just wanted to give you the opportunity. And if they say, get off my property, I'm calling the police, I'm out of there. I go. And I don't go back. Sometimes, like when I first started, I'd like wait half an hour or an hour and try again. I quickly learned that when someone doesn't want to talk, they don't want to talk, particularly if they're grieving. So I might leave my business card in their letterbox, and no one's ever called me. The people that don't want to talk, they don't want to talk.
We've only got a few minutes left, so I might get some final observations from you all before we have to go. Heidi, final words of advice, final things that you want to say on the topic of how you get people to talk to you.
Just be open with people. Be open, be genuine, be clear in what you want, be fair to them, be absolutely fair to them. Let them have their say, use their words however they want them used. They'll come back for more. You'll have built yourself some contacts. You'll have built yourself some trust. Similar with people who want to be off the record. If they're off the record for good reason, show them that you're trustworthy. Show them that you're worth investing more time and energy in. They will build a relationship. You will get decent contacts out of them.
Samaya, what about you? What parting advice would you give to people watching tonight?
I think for me, it's also more about, I guess, contact building than it is about having someone there instantaneously to talk to me. And it's joke with them. I don't know, rant about your colleagues to them. You're trying to get them to rant about their, like their colleagues in Parliament, or, you're trying to get them to rant about some person in some political party. Like, invest in that person as a human and as you would a friend. And the advice that I got at uni was don't turn your contacts into friends. But I just find that advice doesn't work. Like, they're not going to be my best friends, but I still share my life. I share snippets of my life with them because I'm expecting them to share things with me. So it's only right that I return that. And I mentioned this to Matilda, and I'm sorry I haven't raised it until now, but I do want to say it. Like, I struggle with this, like contact building and source relationships all the bloody time. I ask everyone around me, hey, what are your tips? What are your tricks? Like, I promise you, I haven't mastered it. And I think it's just a work in progress.
I was actually, when I approached you, Samaya, and obviously most people watching tonight will be familiar with Samaya's work. It's quite an experienced journalist, regularly on the front page of The Age with some exclusive, very important story from state parliament. And she's like, I'm not sure that I'm quite the right person to do this panel. I don't know if I have the experience. And I think it shows that it's something that you're constantly learning and improving upon all the time. And throughout your career, how you contact people will change. Used to use the yellow pages. Now it's all online. There's nothing in the yellow pages. No one even has them anymore. There was a time when stories would take days because it just took so long to find people. It's constantly changing. So it's good to know that even professionals, people with experience, are still kind of figuring these things out, I think. Cassie, final word goes to you. What's your advice for people if they take home one or two things from this evening? What should they know about finding and building contacts?
I think just be yourself. Just be yourself. Sort of like what Heidi and Samaya were saying. Yes, they are sources and contacts, but they are human beings too. Check in on their birthdays, find out what footy team they go for. Don't just call them up when you need something. And I found that has worked really well for me. I text my contacts, about, hey, did you watch last night's maths episode? Or, just random stuff. Have you watched this on Netflix? How's ISO going? And then when there is something that comes up and I know they're on that job, I'm like, hey, me again. And they're like, cool. And then because that relationship's there and they know that I'm a normal person, I'm not just calling them when I want something. And I think that's really important. To be honest, it's like any friendship or relationship, isn't it? Like, you're not going to call up your friend when you need something. You're going to go have a drink with them first, or hang out with them first, or talk to them about life first. And I think being as yourself as possible is so important, and it is such a work in progress. I am still like, when I was at the Herald Sun, the Mark Butlers and the Anthony Dowsleys, they just make these calls and I'd be like, who are you talking to? How are police just answering your phone calls? Why aren't they picking up for me? So that would be my advice. Just keep at it, have fun with it, and be yourself.
Well, thank you so much for all joining us. Please, if you can thank Channel 7's Cassie Zervos, The Age's Samaya Illambi, and 3OW's Heidi Murphy. To everyone who's watching from home, I really hope you got a lot out of today's edit event. If you have suggestions for future events, or there's something else you want to learn about or hear, feel free to get in touch with me. I'm at Marozzi_M on Twitter, and keen to organise as many events as I can that you guys are interested in. Thanks also to the copyright agency Cultural Fund, which have been supporting the edit for a long time now and enable us to bring you these forums. I can also give you all a bit of a scoop. Our next edit event will be happening in person in mid-April. It's the first time we've gathered together since COVID hit. There'll be more details coming about that on the Melbourne Press Club website. So sign up to the email list if you're interested. Alexis Daish will be joining us on her return from the US, where she's been working as a correspondent for 9 News. So there will be plenty of interesting stuff for her to ask about from her time covering the White House and Donald Trump, among other things. And you can also go to the Melbourne Press Club website if you're interested in attending the Quills. Our annual celebration of Victorian journalism is happening in a couple of weeks on the 26th of March. Bookings are on our website and finalists will be announced on the 15th of March. And no doubt you'll see some of the names of the guests we've had here tonight. Appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us and for all your questions. My name's Matilda Morozzi, and I'll be joining you again in April for our next edit event. Hope to see you all there.